Hi, Daniel. It's great to see you as
Hello,
a
Justin.
fellow Canadian and fellow Madomic Conductors Retreat alum. I appreciate you taking the time for us to get together just to do some chatting. I can ask you a few questions about your experiences, about what your life was like when you came to the retreat. And so it occurs to me the first thing I thought I would ask is, where were you in your journey when you went to the retreat?
Right. I was in a transition stage between being assistant conductor of Thunder Bay Symphony Orchestra and assistant conductor being Kitchener Waterloo Symphony Orchestra. Is that grammar right? I hope so.
Oh,
Anyways,
sure. What year was it?
yeah,
What year was it? What year was it?
yeah. That was 2014 was the first summer, and 2015 was the next summer.
Got
It
it.
was
Okay.
20, is that right? 11, 12. Yeah, that's right. 12, 12.
14,
Yeah, 14 and 15.
so 7, 6 years.
Exactly.
Got it.
Yeah.
Great. So in terms of, so those were your jobs, but where were you, like, I guess, not listing all your education, but just where you were and where you felt you were in the process of
Yeah.
learning.
So at the end of that tenure, the first 3 years, I was pretty tired. I mean, as all assistant conductors know, I was pretty tired. And you, when you're in university, I remember speaking with a friend once who was in university while I was in my first year of conducting, sort of fine conductor. And she said, "Oh, we just finished our, 2 weeks of rehearsals for, I can't remember, like 2 weeks of rehearsals for Beethoven 7 or something like that."
Okay.
And the reality of being an assistant conductor is that sometimes it's like the rehearsals from 4 o'clock until 7, and the concert was at 8. And then the next day something totally different. So it's very, very tired, and it's not the same sort of reflective practice that
Mhm.
you're kind of trained for, but not really. So I was tired, and what I needed was inspiration, and that's what I got at the conductors retreat. Really, that's an inspiration not coming okay, understand, not coming from the conductors retreat, but from the fact that the conductors retreat allows you to delve into the music and you reconnect with this thing that you love, and therein lies the inspiration. So it came at a very seminal point, kind of a little bit of a crossroads. It was, and I've said this before, it was one of the two best weeks of my life. It was the first conductors retreat was one of the two best weeks of my life. I'd never been in anything like that before. It was fantastic.
So had you done a conducting degree before that, or were you doing private
Yes.
study? Yeah.
Yeah, I'd done so at that stage of my career, just so basically to map it out, it was Bachelor of Music and Tuba Performance, go tuba, Bachelor of
Tuba. I didn't know
Education.
that. Wow.
Oh yeah, oh yeah, yeah.
Wow.
Master of Philosophy in Performance, Conducting Performance. And then I taught, and then I did 3 years assistant conductor, and then conductor's retreat.
Got it. Okay. Nice. And sorry, just a quick tangent. A very wonderful, well-known singer is Jennifer Holloway, and I played a recital with her with my opera company years ago, and we were about to go on the stage of Cami Hall, which no longer exists, sadly. And she turned to me and said, "You know, I have an undergraduate in euphonium." And we walked on stage. I'm like, "Oh my!" So you never know, you secret euphonium tuba
Yeah,
people.
that's so funny.
Isn't that great? So how did you find the retreat? How did you know about it?
Right. So that's a good question,
Like,
actually.
who connected you, or where did you see it? Or was it listing somewhere online, or
You know what it was? I think it was all the conducting master classes,
the
and I had heard about it.
mhm,
I had heard about it as well too, and the thing that attracted me was the fact that you didn't have to send in video,
right? It's not
and
about
not because and not because I was ashamed of video,
no, of course.
although
Yeah.
we all have so much to learn. But I was like, oh, this is different.
Hmm.
Oh, this is different. Because at the end of, when you start off conducting, you need to be with other conductors to talk about the craft in a non-competitive environment where it's not just a contest, a
Exactly.
something contest of who knows, this conductor, who's been here, who's done this, who, is related to whoever. I needed something different. And that's what really attracted me to the Conductors Retreat in Madonna.
And that's exactly. And let's be honest. That so many conducting programs are. You pay per the minute. You get time on the podium. Everyone wants to knife you in the back. You get up there and you don't necessarily learn, but you do some conducting and then you get off the podium. And Ken, our founder, it's all about creating that different experience. So it's nice to hear that someone like you saw that as something that was different, and that was one of the things that attracted you. I like that.
Oh yeah, you can smell it a mile away. I mean, musicians
Yeah.
have unions, but conductors don't, right? So how are we building that? How are we building solidarity within the industry? And there is quite a lot of solidarity on the other side of the audition process. That's what I found, at least with my conducting colleagues. So
Yeah, that makes sense. Excuse me. So I went before you, and I went 3 times, and I skipped the year, and then I went the next year for the third time. I didn't do the consecutive year because I got a conducting gig in Hawaii, and it bothered me that I missed, like I couldn't go right back the next year. What was it like? Because it's so different. Even when I went 2 years, it was so different than the first. By definition, it would be. But how did you find that comparison? Not that one's better or worse, but going through the process a second time. Because you said the first week was your favorite week, and that makes sense to me because it was for me as well.
yeah, I think I was much more creative the second time. The second time I went through, we created, just in terms of, without saying too much about what happens at the retreat,
Right.
there was a really, I was able to be much more creative as an artist. And there were things there that I did that I still look back. It's funny because it's not all just about concerts on stage with audiences, right?
Right.
There are moments from that retreat that I look back on as being creative highlights, some of the creative highlights. This is the second retreat, right? For sure. So the first was just this crazy experience of, oh my gosh, this is amazing. I could study Beethoven 7 and then go to the lake and then, walk through, ich bin im Wald, and I can go through the forest and think about it and like take in the spirit. And then the second one was just, okay, I know what's going on. I know what this is going to be like. I can really focus on my areas, the areas that I want to improve in which I want to improve. And really just drill down on stuff and enjoy it. That was just tremendous.
In fact, the first time helps identify the areas, and then the second time you can specialize. I mean, I don't want to be reductionist, but it's kind of a way to I think of it. Wow. So that's a very similar experience. When you mentioned that you don't want to give too much away about it, it's hard for people who haven't been to understand that there are so many things that happen there that if you try to explain them superficially, it can come across as superficially. And some people think, well, we're just in the woods. It's like, no, we're doing intense work, but then you have this release to be in nature and not in a conference room at a high-end somewhere. And so doesn't that make such a difference that you're in, like you said, you're in nature when you can process all of these feelings and the learning process?
Yeah, exactly.
Right. So
I mean, that's the thing. It's really, I mean, what happens on the Conductors retreat? It's really simple. You're just with other like-minded people. Everybody's supportive, and you're in the woods, and it's beautiful. And you get to spend time with the thing that you really love, with people that you grow to love. So that's what makes it really special.
Exactly. That's very well said. So after the retreat, and then you go back into the world, as it were, what were things that how did that affect where you were in your journey? Like, how did you maybe grow or change or have a different perspective? And that sort of relates to the other question of what did you retain from that to this day? So what did you take initially, and then are there things you still draw upon? I mean, I know I have things that I do that go back to Madonic. So I'm just curious what your experience was.
Right. So for me, I tend to take a while to internalize things.
Mm-hmm.
So it took a long time of going over my notes from the retreat and critiques to internalize a lot of the conducting things. And I think over time, they started, like Claire's commented, oh, okay, that's different. Oh, you're more clear over time. And I've continued working on a lot of stuff has now just become part of the technique, right? So definitely just cleaning up my technique. That was just very practical, giving me real tools of score study, and not just, I know we score study, okay, not just how to score study, right? And if everybody will teach you how to score study, okay, fine. Why? And not just so I can get up and look good, but like, why do we study? What difference does it make to the audience that you study? So I think that's one of the main differences in terms of very practical things is that, the why of why we do things, not just how, but why it's important to do things in certain ways for the orchestra. I think that's really beneficial. And then so that's like practical things that I've taken away. Then dealing with more, I guess, esoteric things. It's just knowing that conducting can be collegial, knowing that conducting can be a shared experience, knowing that conducting for your friends can be a very intimate thing. It's just a ball. I've definitely taken away this idea that what we do as conductors is more than conduct. It's about more than the baton. It's about who you are for the musicians on stage and for the community. The idea of having empathy with the musicians, both as people off stage, but as instruments on stage, and what it means to have empathy with the flute or with the oboe or the tuba or the cello or the percussionist as they're playing and thinking about what's happening on their side of the music stand. That's something that's been that I think about a lot. And
What?
I think about how great it is to know that every meal that you have during the day will be some of the best food you've ever had. Some of the meals in Madama are just
Were fantastic.
fantastic. So that was honestly, that was a highlight. That was a super highlight. So what are they making today? Oh my gosh. Blueberry strata. I didn't even know that was a thing.
Blueberry frittata. Okay, great. Yeah, exactly. And did you enjoy the lobster night and the one time we would go to the lobster place on the water, the meal?
Justin, I don't enjoy lobster. I loved the lobster night. I tried.
That's okay.
Okay. Other things I got from Madama. We're just going to be honest. The first time
we're here. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I'd never had lobster before. So the first year I was like, I'm gonna have it. And they put the lobster on my plate and I did my best and it was okay. I didn't really enjoy it. Then the next year, lobster on the plate again, and I tried my best. And then at the end of it, I said, you know what? It's okay for me to not like lobster. This is not a journey that I'm going to continue on for myself. So I learned that it's okay to say no to lobster.
Exactly. But you appreciated being exposed to it, having that main experience at least to know.
Exactly.
And that's why we do it. Listen, I'll tell you, I like the taste of lobster. I'm not so much into the form versus function of taking it apart. And I wore a silk shirt and I didn't get one spot of butter on it. And Ken's like, you're not really embracing the idea of this if you're wearing a silk shirt to a lobster thing. But I did embrace it and loved it. But I'm with you. But so many people love the lobster experience. And for all those who are watching this video, what Daniel said makes so much sense. It's like you're exposed to new things. And I would say 95% of the people love the lobster. So even if you don't incorporate that in your life, it's still a memorable experience of our time.
Right.
Is that fair? Is that fairly put? So here's a nice sort of simplistic, non-large picture question. What advice would you give to the next generation, current generation of conductors based on your insights that you gained from Madama? Now, and again, it's a big question, of course, but we covered the non-competitive part and the idea of being collegial and having empathy with the players, being the conduit for the music. I just wonder if there was anything else that maybe comes to mind.
The question I would ask them is, what are you doing while you're doing what you're doing? What are you doing while you're doing
intentionality, self-awareness?
So, and well, not only that actually, but more this idea that as a conductor, all of the concerts that you're conducting are adding up to something. It's not episodic.
Mm-hmm.
It's cumulative. You're creating an opus of concerts with your life. And what do you want that opus to be? What are you doing while you're doing concert here, concert? It takes bricks to make a wall, right?
Mm-hmm.
Every concert, every appearance, everything is a brick. So what is what are you building? I think that's really important because conducting is more than the pattern. It's more than the history. It's more than orchestration. It's more than intonation. It's more than all these things. What are you doing? And to be really blunt about it, New York Philharmonic calls, Berlin calls, Concertgebouw calls, Philadelphia calls, San Francisco calls, Toronto calls. We want you to conduct them. Okay, great. Now what? Now what? What are you doing for the community? What are you doing for the players on stage during that concert? What are you doing for, are you keeping their kids fed, you know? If you're a music director, are you keeping the lights on? Are you keeping the food on the table? Are you making it so that when an audience comes in that knows Dvorak 9 back to front, as every audience does, that they leave and the musicians on stage are like, that was the best Dvorak 9 I've ever played. That's not easy, right? Like that's what I mean. Are you bringing other communities to the stage? Mm-hmm. So I guess that's something that I learned. That was something where my attention was shifted at Medomec. You know, what are we doing while we're doing the thing that we're doing? It's important to look at the cumulative effect of 40 concerts a year or 5 concerts a year. Right?
Mm-hmm. That's well said. I mean, that takes me back to just the concept of Ken saying you have to have a fully formed musical vision of how you want your vision of the piece, and you get on the podium, and then you convince, you inspire the players, and then you're the conduit to the audience. And I was speaking with the Tim Cobb, actually. He's the former principal bass of the Met. He's now the principal bass of the Phil, and he's an old friend. And he said to me years ago when I was starting out, he said, look, somebody gets up on the podium and within 1 minute we can tell that they've got a vision. Even if I disagree with it completely, I am there for them. But if they get up there and they don't have their vision, why are you in front of us? You don't need to be there. And he's a very nice guy, so he said it very sweetly, but it was one of those things that connected the Medomec experience, the Conductors retreat experience for me, that what you're doing and why you're doing it, while you're doing it. So that's fantastic.
Yeah. And you're basically, I mean, you're basically naked up there, mm-hmm. right? You know, they can tell when you walk up within, I think it's probably like 10 bars, you know, they can tell. They can tell.
People ask me, oh, is that at the performance? I said, no, it's the first rehearsal. The first rehearsal, they're going to know exactly what the deal is. And if you are there for them, and if you're about the music, then the journey begins. A sort of a postscript for the last question, since we're both Canadians, and I've been in New York my life, and I'm eager to come to Canada and do more conducting, but you're in Canada. How would you say the state of conducting is in Canada in terms of what we've talked about? Conductors being more of these empathetic leaders versus I'm not trying to, criticize or not criticize Canada. I'm just curious, since I'm not in the country. How do you think that's going with the current generation of conductors?
I think it is progressing. Mm-hmm. I think it's not just conductors. I think the organizations are moving in that direction as well too. A lot of that is being led by decolonization and looking at the indigenization of our organizations, the ways that we as settlers on the land can learn from, not could learn, but should learn from the people who were here before. The ways that settler mentalities are often at odds with indigenous mentalities, and the Regina Symphony Orchestra in Saskatchewan has an Indigenous Advisory Council that advises them on all matters related to indigeneity and the orchestra when they're performing works. If they want to have an Indigenous performer, how do we do this? What's appropriate? And I had the opportunity to present for Orchestras Canada, one of their, a number of their leaders talking about that Indigenous Advisory Council, and also I had the opportunity to sit in on one of the meetings. And it was just lovely. I came out of it just going like, we talk about decolonization in Canada a lot. We talk about indigeneity, and talk is one thing. When you actually experience it, it's like, oh, this is great. This is way better. This is fantastic, right? And learned a lot from that. So I think that notion of just really feeling that you are on the land, right? For example, right now I'm on the land of the Seneca, the Huron-Wendat, and the Mississaugas of the Credit, and taking it seriously, that's affecting orchestras in Canada a lot.
How is that? That is amazing to hear. And Regina is where Gordon is, right?
Gordon Gerard, that's right.
Just quickly, how is that manifesting itself in terms of the approach, the musicians, the programming, it's great that they have that.
Right. It affects the entire organization because in order, orchestra's very like, we're starting at 1 o'clock, come in, sit down, shut up, play, leave, thank you. Conductor, conduct, try not to talk. Working with Indigenous musicians and other groups as well too. I recently worked with Alan Silboy, musician with Symphony Nova Scotia, and our first rehearsal was a Zoom call, 90-minute Zoom call, rehearsing the relationship. So we all had coffee and we talked, and we just kind of, got used to being with each other, discussing music, right? And then for 20 minutes of music, we had 4 rehearsals before the concert for 20 minutes of music, because his way of working is here's a general template. I'm going to speak over the music, tell a story, and we'll see how it goes. And to us in orchestra land, we'll see how it goes. No, it's going to go exactly like Baron Reiter says. No, it's total opposite. It was one of the most moving experiences we've ever had. So to work in that sort of a style, right, as more orchestras are including Indigenous music and indigeneity in their performances, requires a complete change from the finance department to the person like putting out the chairs to operations to artistic planning. Everybody has to change. And instead of saying, okay, Indigenous performer, we're going to come in and ask you to do this on our schedule and do it bam, 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 which is what I've done in the past. Now we hand over the reins. So I hope that in Canada, decolonization, and I know we're not talking about the Conductors Retreat, but in a sense we actually are.
That's what we are.
Decolonization efforts are about orchestras handing over power to other musicians, showing respect to other musics in ways that we haven't before, seeing the orchestra as a library of sound that can be applied to different music, right? And I feel that this is very, very vital work that we're doing, because I believe that the future of our art depends on it. Our ability to collaborate effectively and respectfully with other practitioners to create new forms of orchestral art.
Incredibly well said, and it absolutely relates to the message and mission of the retreat.
Yeah, and to be clear, right? Because I'm talking about, I could take you to where I was standing, where we were having discussions as conductors about this sort of stuff. What are we really doing as conductors? What are we really doing with music, right? And it's not like, we have big ideas and then
no implementation.
And then there's score study. It's like, no, like you have to get like that chord in tune, because that creates excitement. When you create that excitement in the audience, then people feel something. When they're feeling it together, you've created community and a bond, an experience, and now you can talk.
Yep.
But if you didn't know that chord was there, you didn't highlight it, it's gone. So there's a direct link between the work that you're doing at 1 o'clock in the morning. Don't go past 1, get some sleep. You have to be mental health. But between the work that you're doing at that time, like staccato, like when the articulation is there, it creates something, right? And that's a small brick that creates bigger structures in your community. Crazy. Staccatos can do that.